A tiny finger pressed a cracked phone, and the city answered. No one expected who would come. It's the busiest hour at Mombasa's shoreline market. Amina Karunja, 28, tired from 6 days of hauling fish and fruit, weaves between stalls with her 2 little girls perched on her hips. The sun pins everyone to their stalls. Amina's steps falter, a sharp pain, then darkness. She collapses onto warm sand and scattered tomatoes. Schrader's freeze. The twins' tiny hands pat her face. One of them, Zara, reaches for a cracked old phone in Amina's bag. With a child's blunt curiosity, she presses the green button. A single wrong number call is sent into the city, a call that will split this morning into before and after. The crowd tightens like a noose. Whispers metastasize into accusation. Superstitions rise where health services are thin. A vendor says, "People like this attract trouble." Another mother pulls her child back, as if contagion were visible. Amina is pale and breathing shallow. A thin smear of blood stains her scarf. The twins scream, not understanding, only alarmed. Samuel Oketch, a passing mechanic with grease under his nails, kneels and checks for a pulse. He calls out for calm while someone fetches water. The phone call keeps ringing in the air like a fragile lifeline. On the phone, the line clicks. A stranger's voice answers to baby babble and muffled market noise. Their muffled hello turns to immediate concern. The voice belongs to Samuel at first, but then the number routes. It reaches a wrong number switch and lands unexpectedly at a private clinic's duty line. A brief, calm conversation. The mechanic explains. The twins repeat mama. The caller promises help. People glance toward the horizon where an ambulance is scheduled. Is a rumor. Response time. Hours. In that moment, a businessman on his way to a meeting sees the scene from his window and pauses, but he keeps walking. He has not yet made the choice that will change everything. A sleek black SUV parts the market like a calm tide. Daniel Mwangi, 48, founder of a private hospital chain, steps out, suit, quiet authority, a man used to solving problems with resources many don't have. He's in Mombasa for a business visit. Cameras from curious onlookers flash. He doesn't hesitate. He kneels and checks Amina, issues short orders to his assistant, and calls for his private clinic ambulance. The twins look up and reach for him. Daniel's eyes stay on the children. For a moment, he is simply a man who cannot turn away. Then he signs, "Take her now." The market watches, breath held. The private clinic ambulance threads through narrow streets, siren a thin bird song above market noise. Amina's breathing is ragged. An oxygen mask fogs her soft cheek. Daniel sits close, hands folded, eyes scanning monitors like a man checking ledgers, except tonight the sums are human. Samuel holds the twins' tiny hands on the gurney's edge, whispering nonsense to calm them. Nurses move like practice waves, efficient, kind, quick. In the back, Zara presses her face to Amina's sleeve, a child's trust like a small beacon. For Amina, life tilts between blurred breaths and the promise of real care. Daniel's assistant reads the clinic forms aloud. Cost is irrelevant. Someone already decided pay. The ambulance wheels hum a low, urgent rhythm toward a private wing that rarely sees this kind of human urgency. At the clinic, white halls smell like antiseptic and urgency. The triage doctor's face is professional but tired. He speaks in clipped sentences. Internal bleeding. We need the theater. Now. The words fall like a rain that drowns bargaining. Samuel's throat tightens. He is not family. The nurse looks to Daniel, whose presence changes the conversation. Daniel's voice is calm, decisive. Do it. He signs forms without a second thought. His signature, a door swung open. The twins stare through glass as Amina is prepped. A surgical cap flutters over her hair as someone tucks a blanket over her small frame. The market murmurs in memory. Superstition and gossip outside, sterile machines inside. Time distills into a continuous beep. The clinic's waiting room is a small island of chairs and magazines nobody reads. Samuel rocks the twins on his knee, humming a lullaby he barely remembers. Neighbors from the market arrive in a trickle, some apologetic, some curious. Amina's neighbor, an older woman who sold herbs by the pier, brings a small wrapped bundle. a stitch cloth, and a handwritten name. Daniel's assistant organizes logistics, arranging a room for the twins and a nurse to watch them. Whispered gratitude lingers in Samuel's mouth. The twins' palms are sticky with sugar someone slipped them. Hope and shame sit side by side. Hope because hope exists. Shame because the town thinks sickness is crooked. Samuel promises Amina, aloud and half to himself, that he will not let the children go hungry tonight. A midwife folds a small locket from Amina's pocket and places it on the nurse's station. A brass heart with a faded photograph inside. It's nothing to most, but Daniel catches a glint and pauses. He knows that Locket's jeweler, an old craftsman his family once supported. For a second his face empties, as if memory brushed him. A hospital wing years ago, a quiet woman with the same cheekbones. He hides a pause and gives orders, but the seed of recognition has been planted. Samuel notices the look and asks what's wrong. Daniel only says, "We'll know when she wakes." The waiting room exhales. Outside, the market still talks. Inside, a man with money wonders why his heart quickened for a stranger's locket. Surgeons consult, lists are checked, and a delicate operation is planned. The lead doctor explains risk, possible transfusion, careful suturing, uncertain recovery. Samuel's voice is small when he asks about outcomes. Daniel stands and speaks with clarity that calms the room. He signs consent forms as guarantor, but he insists Samuel is the family contact. The surgical team prepares, and Daniel kneels for a moment to place the hospital's chaplain with the twins. Before taking Amina to theater, Samuel presses his forehead to hers in one quick, human prayer. The twins pat her cheek with sticky fingers, a child's blessing. Then the doors close with a soft, surgical whisper. The operating theater is a world apart, bright, humming, and precise. Time stretches into measured instruments and the clipped language of surgeons. Samuel waits in a corridor that permits no sleep. Daniel quietly reviews surgical notes with the lead surgeon. Outside, Daniel's assistant updates the twins' watch nurse, offering crayons and a soft toy to anchor the children's small world. In the corridor, a janitor watches the glass doors, the town's gossip kept at bay by sterile glass and rhythm of machines. The operation begins. Each cut and stitch is a bet against a life lived in market dust. For the twins, a faint memory of a mother warming their cheek keeps the theater's beeps tethered to hope. While surgeons stitch the present, Amina's mind fights for small memories. Sun on a tin roof, her mother teaching her braid fishnets, the day she first held her twins. We see a montage in her mind, younger Amina selling the first catch, bargaining for baby milk, the tiny handprints on a kitchen wall. The memory montage gives us the life she built. Love measured in borrowed sugar, late-night lullabies, and a necklace threaded from coins. These images are not clinical. They are the reason for the risk, the tether that keeps her fighting under anesthetic. Even in fragments, her motherhood rises like a lighthouse, ordinary and relentless. Hours fall like an old calendar. Finally, the theater doors open. A nurse steps out, face composed but tired. Samuel stands as if pulled by a string. The nurse's mouth moves. Words deliver like a coin placed in a palm. "We did what we could," she begins and pauses, and Samuel feels the floor tilt. Daniel's hand finds Samuel's shoulder in a steadying grip. The twins' toy drops from a nurse's clipboard and rolls towards Samuel's sandal as the camera lingers on a monitor screen. A heartbeat line that steadies, then flickers and steadies again. The scene ends on that line. A small boom of hope, a long breath held. The viewer is left wondering, will Amina wake? The answer is not yet, and the suspense draws you forward. Hours of waiting condense into a single brittle moment. A nurse calls Samuel to bedside, whispering that Amina's fingers twitched. Samuel rushes in like a ship finding shore. He takes Amina's hand and presses a tiny, prayer-like squeeze. The twins, in a cot pushed close, press their faces to the blanket and listen for the answer. Daniel stands just behind Samuel, voice quiet and oddly fragile as he tells the nurse, "Keep me near." For the first time since the collapse, there's a small human proof that the body is listening, a tiny, deliberate movement. It's enough to unspool a month of fear into a single evening of fragile hope. Samuel whispers to the twins that Mama is fighting. The twins answer with a small, determined babble That sounds like a promise. Daniel steps onto the hospital balcony for air and, with a hand pressed to his temple, dials an old contact, a small craftsman who made jewelry decades ago near the port. He describes a brass heart locket and the faded photograph. The craftsman's voice goes still. Layla Mwangi, the man says after a pause. The name is a stone dropped into Daniel's chest, a sister who left when he was young, whose face he kept in an old memory album. Daniel looks at the tiny photograph again under lamplight and realizes the face inside might be the very woman he'd never stopped searching for. He returns inside with a new, heavier purpose, questions that must be answered. Back in the waiting room, Daniel and Samuel sit face to face. Daniel offers to underwrite every medical bill, but Samuel's pride pushes back. He wants dignity for Amina and the children, not charity that erases their name. The conversation is quiet and fierce. Samuel explains how Amina worked the market at dawn and cared for neighbors' children by moonlight. Daniel listens and confesses he grew up with money that never taught him how to ask for mercy. They strike an uneven pact. Daniel will pay and fund care, but Samuel will remain the twins' voice. The moment crystallizes into respect. Practical, unshowy, and stronger than the spectacle outside. The hospital's small rules begin to bend around the people who need them. Amina drifts between sedation and memory. In quiet vignettes, she is very small again. A tin-roofed house where rain smells like hot metal, a woman braiding hair by lamplight, a laughter made of two voices. She remembers the first time she braided her twins' hair, fumbling and learning with patient hands. She remembers the small jar where she kept coins for school fees, and the day she chose not to sell the last coin, so the twins could have milk. Those memories stitch a map of why she kept going, because small, stubborn love outlived bigger fears. The montage is gentle, textured, and never sentimental. These are practical treasures that kept her children fed and brave. Just as hope settles, monitors stutter, a fever spikes. Nurses move quickly, antibiotics are adjusted. The small emergency reawakens the waiting room's old fear. Samuel grips the cot rail, as if it were a lifeline. Daniel, who has watched life through financial ledgers and board meetings, finds his hands shaking as he signs for expedited tests. The twins stir and cry at the sound of hurried footsteps. A pediatric nurse soothes them and tucks a damp cloth behind their necks. For a breathless hour, the story tilts between rescue and loss, and every beep of the monitor counts like a vote for tomorrow. The team refuses to lose the race. Every small effort is loud. This is the moment that pulls the story sideways. The craftsman calls back with clarity. The brass heart was made for Layla Mwangi, Daniel's sister, 28 years earlier. Daniel's throat tightens as hospital admin pulls archived intake sheets and an old regional registry. A name starts to repeat in the brittle print. Layla Mwangi. The faded photo in a locket is matched against a scanned yearbook picture kept in Daniel's family album. The jawline, the cheekbones, the precise arch of the eyebrow line like puzzle pieces. Everyone in the room feels the air change. This isn't just charity anymore. It could be family. The waiting room leans forward. Engagement spikes. A new question now drives the story. What if Amina is linked to Daniel in ways no one expected? Daniel moves with controlled urgency. He orders a social worker, searches archives, and calls distant relatives. Each phone call adds a stitch. Layla had worked near the same docks, had friends who remembered her laugh, had left a child in a neighbor's care during a cholera season years back. Small confirmations pile up until a picture becomes more than a guess. Samuel sits down heavily as the possibility blooms. Not only was Amina unknown to Daniel, she might be his blood. Daniel's composure fractures into something softer. He remembers childhood promises to protect family. The room fills with a hush that feels like exposure. Names rearranged into a new family map. The room rearranges itself around a new possibility. Daniel turns to Samuel and says simply, "If she is family, we do this properly." He offers not only to pay, but to open doors, legal aid, follow-up care, school fees for the twins, a place on a rehabilitation program. Samuel's pride warily accepts. He asks only one thing, that Amina wake to know they fought for her. Daniel agrees, and in that handshake the two men make a pact that feels like ownership of a promise, not a check. The twins are bundled and placed under warm lights. A nurse smooths Amina's brow as the camera lingers on the heartbeat monitor. The last line pulls tight. The next scene will be the wake or not moment. Will Amina open her eyes and name the man who calls himself family? Someone in the waiting room, an anxious relative of another patient, had filmed the twins pressing the phone, and the moment Amina collapsed. It was a shaky 15-second clip. The tiny hand, the cracked screen, the market chaos. The clip spreads like a folded note across phones. First local WhatsApp groups, then county threads, then an influencer repost. Sympathy pours in, but so does speculation. Strangers ask for updates. Others call the hospital asking to donate. Daniel instructs hospital PR to keep things private, but allows a controlled, short update that thanks the city and asks for privacy. That small clip, born of fear and tenderness, becomes the outside pulse that changes how the town sees Amina. No longer a rumor, but a human being with faces and a name. Impressions spike online. People start bringing clothes and formula for the twins. A few even text to ask how they can help with school fees. The market vendors' whispers turn to offers of bread and apologies. Social media has a voice. It now chooses compassion. Nurses call the small room to attention. Amina's eyelids fluttered longer than before. The team dims lights, speaks softly, and plays a lullaby, the same tune Samuel hummed in the waiting room. A blurred hand lifts. A tear traces a slow line down her cheek. The twins press at the cot rail, instinctively sure their mama is near. Daniel stands closer than before, face unreadable and prayerful at once. The attending physician says only what medicine allows. She's responding. Hope spreads like warm tea among those present. Phones in pockets quieten. Samuel's voice breaks when he whispers, "Mama?" And Amina's fingers curl around air like a promise. It is a small return, but it is enough to start belief again, and urge the hospital prepare for a careful, gradual waking rather than sudden fanfare. As Amina drifts between sleep and waking, she hums, a short lullaby from her childhood, a melody Daniel's grandmother once sang, an old Port Town tune that threaded families together. Daniel recognizes a cadence and freezes. The melody knocks on a memory-locked door. Samuel leans in, repeating the lullaby softly until Amina's mouth forms a word that sounds like an old name. Lie, then silence. It's not clear, but the syllable lands like a pebble in a pond. People in the room exchange looks that hover between disbelief and something like destiny. Daniel clenches his jaw and asks for the locket again, fingers trembling as he slides the brass heart into view. The melody, small and human, becomes a clue the heart cannot ignore. While Amina sleeps, Daniel pivots to paperwork. He orders a discreet search for any record tied to Leila Mwangi, trawling old hospital ledgers, birth registries, and port work permits. Administrators pull dusty files and scan them. Samuel watches as an archivist flips to a brittle page where Leila is listed as a clinic aide decades earlier. The notes are sparse, dates, a brief mention of relocation. But they offer direction. Daniel arranges for a modern clinical DNA test to be expedited, explaining that sometimes the slow path is the truest. Paper and science can confirm what memory hints at. He knows confirmation will take time. That delay becomes a new engine of tension in the story. Meanwhile, neighbors bring photographs and stories, filling gaps with human detail that paperwork never captured. Back in the market, video comments translate to action. Vendors who had whispered, which now bring porridge and sugar as apologies. A woman who once pushed Amina aside places both hands on Samuel's shoulder and weeps. The community begins a quiet repentance. Simple, practical acts. The carpenter offers to repair Amina's shack. A teacher pledges to help enroll the twins in a local preschool. Women club together to buy a month's milk. Samuel walks through that afternoon, and the same hands that once pointed now reach to steady his. The market's narrative bends from rumor to repair, and this public healing stitches trust that will matter when the bigger truth arrives. Even the town gossip becomes a song of regret and slow amends. Amina's first clear words slice through 2 sleepless days. "My girls," she breathes. It's a simple claim, fragile and fierce. Samuel collapses into a sob that is half gratitude and half relief. The twins react like sunlight opening, arms outstretched, Sticky fingers grasping at a voice that used to hum them to sleep. Nurses cry quietly. The chaplain whispers thanks, and Daniel stands at the periphery, hand over his heart, his eyes rimmed with moisture. The hospital room becomes a cathedral of small things, a mother uttering the names of her children, a community answering with sustenance, a man with money learning how to be still. The moment is cinematic, intimate, and pure, the anchor every viral story needs to keep watchers through to the next beat. As Amina stitches words together, she describes a small, oddly specific thing, a mango tree near the old ice house where a woman used to sit and mend nets. Daniel's assistant blanches. Daniel's father once owned an ice house adjacent to the very mango tree. It's a small human detail that cracks open a memory chain. The neighbor who used to bring mangoes, the sound of metal on net, domestic threads that map onto the family narrative Daniel has carried for years. It still isn't proof, but it is a connective tissue, a human bruised breadcrumb that makes the family story feel less like conjecture and more like a map. Everyone in the room recognizes the stakes. Questions begin to arrange themselves into a plan to confirm what hearts already suspect. The chapter closes on action. Daniel sets legal and social wheels in motion, DNA test expedited, schooling funds arranged, and a small rehabilitation plan for Amina. He insists on privacy and dignity, asking the hospital to limit press access, while arranging for a social worker to help the family transition. Samuel accepts with guarded relief, still protective of the twins' future. The hospital staff files the necessary paperwork. A courier is dispatched to retrieve an old family photograph Daniel remembered earlier. The story has shifted from crisis to plan. Viewers feel momentum. The scene ends on a gentle cliff. A sealed envelope labeled results laid on Daniel's desk, the camera holding on for 3 beats before cutting to black. The promise. Confirmation is coming, and when it lands, it will change everything. The sealed envelope that has been resting like a promise on Daniel's desk is open at last. The paper slides free. The lab's heading, the test ID, and then the line that rearranges every life in the room, a genetic confirmation that the locket's picture wasn't a trick of memory. The test reads as familial match. Amina is the daughter of Layla Mwangi, Daniel's sister. There's a sharp, impossible silence. Sound itself seems to wait. Samuel's knees go weak, and he grips the cot rail. Daniel's face changes in a blink. From corporate calm to a man unmoored by wonder. He traces the printed words with a fingertip, like one might trace a photograph. The hospital staff watch a private history become public fact. The story no longer belongs only to the market. It belongs to a family whose map had been missing a branch. Daniel makes phone calls he has avoided for years. One to an aunt who lives inland, another to a cousin who kept family albums. Voices on the other end begin to stitch a story. Layla's disappearance, an argument with a distant husband, a decade of unanswered letters. Daniel arranges a quiet reunion. Elderly relatives will come to the hospital to look, to listen, and to place memory beside fact. Samuel watches the screen as names he's never heard are spoken like treasures. The hospital becomes a slow junction between present need and past mistakes. Each call is careful and tender. Daniel insists on privacy because he understands the cost of spectacle. But even with discretion, the truth leaks outward like light through curtains. People begin to understand there is more at stake than a single collapse. The relatives arrive in a small procession. An aunt with stooped shoulders, a cousin with battered photo album in hand, a neighbor who remembers the name. They move slowly into the hospital room like pilgrims, hearts heavy with memory. Daniel sits with the album open and lays a locket photo next to a picture of Layla as a young woman. Gasps and whispered confirmations trail through the room. The jawline, the cheekbones, the laugh frozen in black and white. Samuel watches as an older woman reaches across and touches Amina's hand with a trembling palm, murmuring a name as if testing its shape. The hospital hums with human sound that is neither clinical nor exotic. It is the quiet of a family beginning to gather around the truth. It's tender, awkward, full of shame, and soaked in relief. Daniel chooses a market for a quiet gesture. He will not parade his discovery in the hospital's fluorescent light. He will stand among the people where the story began. He arrives early with crates of food and vouchers for the vendors who had fed Amina and made space during her recovery. At first, the vendors watch his suited figure with disbelief. This is a man whose name once was distant, now kneeling to tie a ribbon around the market's community notice board. A woman who once spat, which cannot say the words made earlier. Instead, she brings a basket of fruit and bowls with a voice that cracks. Cameras from local phones capture the scene, but Daniel speaks to the market, not the lenses. He offers steady, practical help, a fund for the twins' education, and a promise to refurbish the community clinic that failed many in quiet ways. The market, which once pointed, now folds him into its story. Amina wakes fully for first time with family around her and sunlight slanting through the blinds. Her eyes are slow, the world heavy with new oxygen and old stories. Daniel sits at her bedside, hand extended, while the aunt softly says Layla's name near her ear. At first, Amina's face shows confusion. Memories don't flip on like bulbs, but then something like recognition dawns. The same lullaby, the same way light used to fall on a mango tree. She reaches for the brass locket Daniel places in her palm. Her fingers close over it as if meeting a long-lost friend. She forms the name Layla, and then looks at Daniel with a question that is equal parts fear and hope. The reunion is not cinematic device, but human reckoning. A woman figuring out who she is with new faces claiming her. Daniel lays out an offer that goes beyond money. Legal help to recover any inheritance rights connected to Layla, vocational training for Amina, guaranteed schooling for the twins, and a quiet apartment near the clinic if she wants it. But Daniel also knows dignity matters as much as bread. When he finishes, Samuel speaks for Amina in the gentle bluntness of a friend who knows her grit. She will not be a charity case. She will accept training and school fees, but she asks to keep her market stall because work is how she keeps her backbone straight. Daniel listens and agrees. Support without erasing selfhood. The handshake between Daniel and Samuel that follows is not transactional. It is a promise to protect choice. The scene offers the viewer a moral payoff. Compassion that honors agency is the kind that lasts. The market organizes a small celebration to welcome the family back. Simple, sunlit, and loud with drums. Neighbors lay out a table of fried fish and sweet mandazi. Children run about with strings of bright paper. Daniel stands back and lets the community lead. He helps lift a battered crate as if he were no stranger to this place. Vendors who had once closed their stalls now clap and call Amina by name. A public restitution that matters more than the camera's click. A local teacher announces a small scholarship in Layla's name, and the carpenter promises a repaired stall. The celebration is modest but real. Forgiveness that translates into action. The twins are passed from lap to lap, sticky fingers, and laughter knitting a new social tapestry. A month later, a small van arrives outside a refurbished community center. The twins, in tidy little uniforms, clutch tiny backpacks, and a locket loops quietly in Amina's neckline. Samuel walks them to the threshold, and Daniel watches from the edge of the crowd, pride and a soft protectiveness in his expression. Amina pauses on the threshold and looks back at the market she's always loved. She lets out a breath that tastes like new beginnings and chooses the doorway. As the twins step into kindergarten, the camera holds on a tableau, a mother standing straighter, a community repaired in small actions, and a man who learned how to make space for family when life demanded it. The payoff is not a check or a headline. It is a slow, bright life rebuilt one small choice at a time. The celebration quiets and the work begins. Daniel sits with social worker and Samuel to complete IDs, birth registrations, and enrollment forms for the twins. Paper is transformed into protection. A birth certificate, a health card, and a small bank account opened in the twins' names. Amina signs with a shaky hand, and Daniel holds the pen steady so dignity sits beside the signature. The social worker explains microgrants and a small stipend for the first 6 months. Each stamp page is a shield against the old threats of gossip and precarity. Each sign sheet is a promise that the children will have choices. The room hums with practical hope. Small bureaucratic boxes checked so love can breathe easier. The social clip that once stirred compassion becomes attention. A local TV crew requests an interview. Daniel refuses a headline spectacle but agrees to a short, guided piece that highlights the clinic and market's cooperation instead of Amina's misfortune. Amina, wary of performance, steps before the camera with Samuel at her side and the twins fidgeting on his lap. The questions are gentle, The host praises community action. Afterwards, curious customers begin to flock to Amina's stall for porridge and grilled fish, curious to support the woman they saw on screen. She bargains for dignity, refusing charity plates, instead offering small portions for a fair price. The spike in customers is a blessing and a test. She must learn to scale without losing the stall that keeps her grounded. Months pass in the small Axe compound. Daniel follows through. A refurbished clinic wing now holds a sign, Layla Mwangi Community Health and Outreach. Amina completes vocational training in food safety and small business bookkeeping offered by the clinic. She hires 2 women from the market to help run a cooperative stall. Their laughter is a ledger of shared dignity. Samuel mentors youth at the market and helps manage petty cash. Daniel quietly funds a small revolving grant that keeps the co-op afloat through slow weeks. That night, the market closes with music, drums, a shared meal, and the feeling that lives once frayed are being rewoven. The payoff is slow, a life rebuilt one steady, patient day at a time. A year has passed and small things have become sturdier. The twins laugh across a classroom as a teacher pins their name tags. Amina, standing straighter, flips a hot plate with practiced ease at the cooperative stall and waves when Daniel passes by, a silent nod between 2 people who learn how to belong to one another. Samuel pushes a bicycle piled with school supplies, smiling like a man who kept a promise. The camera pulls back to capture the market, the clinic sign, and the family framed by a sunrise over Mombasa's shoreline, ordinary, repaired, and real. This is not the end of struggle, but is the proof that care stitched into action becomes legacy. Moral lesson. A single, frightened call started a chain of kindness. Today a mother stands, 2 children are learning, and a whole market learned what compassion looks like. Small acts change lives, be that act. If Amina's courage move you, do 3 quick things that make a real difference. Tap like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next true life story. And share this with one person who believes in kindness. Tell us below, who would you call if the babies made that call?